folks who are just joining. It's good to see everybody. Definitely say hello. Talk to us in the chat box. Tell us where you are zooming in from. And it's great to see everybody on this Sunday. Hello, as people are joining. We're all waving. Hi, Kathy. How are you? Judy. And so good to see all these familiar faces and names and some new ones as well. Awesome. How is everybody doing? Definitely check in on the chat box. Definitely say hello. Tell us where you're joining from. We're going to start in about a minute. Well, we're actually at the 4 o'clock mark. And as you know, I like to start on time. Let me just start with a few updates before we introduce our guests, just so you guys know. And Donald is with us, thankfully, to help out with the chat box and some behind the scenes stuff. So thank you, Donald, in advance. In case you didn't know, my last Meet the Miniaturist, I didn't have one last weekend, but I did with the weekend before. Definitely check this out on the replay. It was with Steve Putnam. Awesome miniaturist out of the UK, really, really talented guy. Replays on my YouTube channel. You can catch all the replays on my YouTube channel, which we'll put the link in the box there. I do want to thank you all who purchased on my last auction eBay, which was a benefit for Wounded Warrior Project. Definitely look into Dale Dirks. He's 81 years old and he's painting every single day. And he wants to give back. And this is the way he is doing it. He's painting for a cause. So I partnered with him on an auction, a special auction, and we did really well. And I want to thank you in case some of you have purchased some of his tiny paintings. They're really awesome. I have an estate sale going on right now on my eBay site. So check it out. This is the very tail end of an estate sale from a collector who did lots of buying around yummy, tiny miniature food. So check that out. You'll want to get in on that. Even if you want to do some window shopping, it's really good just to see minis. I did a special Instagram live yesterday, by the way. I'm also going to link to that as well, the replay on that. I did an Instagram live and I shared my own personal collection or some pieces from my personal collection, as well as some of the pieces on auction now. So check that out if you want to see an advance of what's going on that for that estate sale. A couple of other things. I got a Meet the Miniaturist happening next Sunday, which is sponsored by HBSMiniatures.com. It's a super demonstration-esque. It's called Let's Get Gluing, and I'll be hosting it. This is an introduction to glue. We know how glue can be so it spurs on lots of anxiety. So this will be about glues, but it'll also be a way of sort of getting folks to feel better about the glues that they choose and how they work with glue. And then finally, I've got a ton of Meet the Miniaturists coming up. So I'm going to just put the updates of who they are in the chat box. I don't have links yet to the registration, but I will be sending out registration links over the next week or so. So definitely make sure you sign up for my updates so you get those registration links. And sign up on my website. But there's 3 Meet the Miniaturists coming up. One is with Nicholas Bush. He's a photographer. So I'm calling this like the photographer's edition of Meet the Miniaturist. He's an awesome miniaturist, but he's also an awesome photographer. Those 2 pieces coming together, whoosh, head explosion of wonderful, wonderful imagery and miniatures. And then finally, I'm bringing back Craig LeBenz and Wendy Littlepage, who unfortunately, we had to reschedule, but they're now back on the calendar. So look for registration links for those. And with that, I would like to introduce our very special guest, Amanda Kelly, and thank her for joining. Just a little bit of a top-line introduction about Amanda. Amanda and I go way back, probably to 2018 or so.
16, I think, before that.
So Amanda has been challenging miniatures since 2016. We're going to put the link to her website in below, but you're originally from the New York City area, spent time in Brooklyn. Now you're in Virginia with your partner, fiance. You've been making miniatures for a while now. You're an art educator, and now you're working in a museum, which was heads up, breaking news, but you're also going back to school. So there's a lot going on. You make miniatures. You're also, what I would like to say is, you are an original badass miniaturist. I think you're one of this is when I first met you, we met at a show, I think, and I was like, this is a person who is changing the dynamic, changing the discussion around miniatures and making them, I want to say making them cool, but I don't want to, because that makes it sound like they weren't cool before. But I think you've been able to capture miniatures in a light that I think makes most people feel like, this is something I want to do. This is something I want to make. This is something I want to go out and see. So I think you're really changing the conversation. But mostly what I think you're doing is you're changing the dynamic on how miniatures are being made. And we're going to talk a bit about the 3D imaging, that 3D technology that you use to make your miniatures in this episode of Meet the Miniaturist. So with that, and I'm so excited that that we got you to come on and chat with us about this, because I think it's going to be awesome. And I think it's great for people to see what is happening in the miniatures world and to meet someone like you who's bringing this stuff to the miniatures world. So thank you for joining us today, Amanda. And so tell us a little bit about, with that, tell us a little bit about your background in art and your transition over to deciding that miniatures was thing that you wanted to really concentrate on.
Thanks, Darren. Thanks for having me on. Like, we definitely go way back, especially the show circuit. So my undergrad degrees are in illustration and art history. So really my love for miniatures started when I was a kid with my grandma's dollhouse, which I actually own now and have been renovating. But I really didn't get into the miniature community or anything like that until college, until I was in the dorm building my first dollhouse kit. People thought I was a little crazy, but I used to, obsessively watch YouTube videos about other miniaturists, what was going on at the time. And that was around 2015, 2016, when miniatures were still kind of, there were modern miniatures and people doing different things, but it was still primarily, Victorian type miniatures, which I definitely appreciate and have quite a collection of, especially from my grandma's dollhouse collection. But I wanted something different. I wanted to show kind of things from my own life, especially miniatures from my own life. And they just weren't available on the market. And I was also a poor college student. So at the time I was like, I have to make all this stuff myself. And that's when I kind of started making more unique and adult miniatures that really, once I got on Instagram, it kind of my Instagram kind of skyrocketed from there. And, just doing commissions over the years with Coca-Cola and Netflix, it's kind of gotten me more work professionally with doing miniatures and doing different things. And something that I found through doing all those commission works, especially Coca-Cola, was 3D printing. And that was around the end of 2017, early 2018, when I got my first 3D printer, and it was $200 from Amazon. I still have her, she's still doing work for me. So I got into 3D printing totally not knowing anything about 3D modeling or anything like that, and I had to teach myself basically from YouTube videos and forum posts. And I made a lot of mistakes. I wasted a lot of plastic now looking back. But
so I want to ask you though, before you talk about the 3D, because we're going to totally get into 3D. I want to take a step back, because I think you said something really interesting about how when you first entered this world, all you saw were Victorian. And sort of that, I don't know what we would call it, old staid, I don't know, but that is very typical of what everybody thought of as miniatures. And I think this is the first time I'm sort of finding that, what is that timeline where things have shifted? And you're telling me you came into this world, you saw that, and you either wanted to change it or saw a shift, or both, or did you see both happening? Because I feel like you were on the edge at that time of changing that discussion, and part of leading that discussion, as you are today, leading the technology in making miniatures. So talk a little bit about that time and what you were seeing and what you wanted to do. Expand a little bit more about how you wanted to change that, and then talk about what are the things you made that really changed that dynamic. And I know you have some things to share with us.
Yeah, when I went to my first show, it was Philadelphia Miniatura. I was way back in 2016, not that far back, but I went to that show, and I really wanted different types of miniature kits and, miniatures, and really all I saw were, there were a couple of vendors that were selling modern type miniatures, but a lot of it was Victorian type things, which sometimes I would buy the kits and maybe change the color or the fabric or something to make them a little more modern. But there was almost so much, you can do to change a kit like that. So yeah, I definitely saw a shift, specifically on social media. And I feel like Instagram in general is probably the best place, other than maybe Facebook, to really see different kinds of miniatures. And I followed a whole bunch of accounts, everything from, people based in the US to Japanese miniaturists who I was obsessed with at the time, because they're always making very accurate to scale miniatures and using different techniques like vacuum formers and all sorts of things that I didn't have access to. But I definitely think the shift was around 2016. And from there, I've seen a ton of new miniaturists on the scene. And I love it. I'm so happy that, like, not just me, but other miniaturists who, have done a lot of commercial work are kind of putting out, miniatures into the general public.
Yeah. So where is the inspiration coming from? Is it a little bit from what you see, and is it a little bit, where is that inspiration coming from? Just in general, and what drives you to make something, and then I hope you'll be able to share some of it.
Yeah, so my background is in fine art. I do a lot of oil painting and drawing and things like that. So always, even when I was doing art, paintings and things, it was always coming from a personal place, from my own life. And at the time I was living in New York City, you just walk outside and you're inspired. So a lot of my early work was kind of like New York City scenes, things from New York. Like I did, the last lesbian bar in New York City, Henrietta Hudson. I made a miniature of that for a show. And a lot of the things that I make are just reflective of myself, of what I want to see, of what is a part of my life. And yeah, I just, basically my life is a lot of inspiration. And I try not to follow trends that I see on Instagram or anything like that. But, I see more gritty kind of realistic scenes now, which is awesome. I love that type of work. But my work has kind of evolved into more about like scenes from my life, and not so much like scenes from outside my window kind of thing.
And there's an edginess to your work, and I guess that, just like any artist, it's coming from the heart, it's coming from your experience, it's coming from your brain. So, and that comes through in your art. So, and I know that a lot of the work that I have fallen in love with has that edginess, has the grittiness, has the the story behind it. And that's what I love to see. And that's one of the reasons why, like, you're like one of the original Badass Miniaturists. I look back, we did a show together. I had a show called Badass Miniatures. You created a couple of wonderful pieces. Like I said, they're edgy. You want to talk a little bit about those pieces?
Yeah, so the first one was her bed, right? I did that one for that show. Really funny enough, I posted a throwback of her bed yesterday, I think. I don't know what day it is. Yesterday, and the famous art critic Jerry Saltz put it on his Instagram.
No way! That's awesome.
Yeah, I was blown away because
he loves miniatures, by the way. He is posting about miniatures all the time. I didn't know that. Mazel tov. Congratulations.
Thank you. I was blown away because it is inspired by Tracy Emin's piece, which was very famous in the art world in the 90s. And that was one of the pieces where I kind of like let loose. And at the time I didn't have 3D printers, so I was making everything by hand. And it was a really challenging piece for me, and I really enjoyed it, and it's on my wall right now. But yeah.
Pull it down, or no? Is it too far up?
Yeah, actually I could take it down.
Oh, I think it would be amazing if we could see it. And guys, while we're waiting, please feel free to use the chat box to ask any questions you might have while Amanda gets this piece. I mean, this work really is just stunning, and just tell us more about it.
Yeah, I will say that my cats have been playing with it, so it did get a little damaged. And the light, because this was made, I don't know, like 3 years ago, the LED has burnt out. But
it happens. It's miniatures, and they're very finicky.
Miniatures, yeah.
Yeah.
So this is This is where my cat destroyed the lamp, so just ignore that.
So let's talk about what we're seeing.
So this is based on Tracy Emin's work, My Bed. And basically she had a really bad breakup and was in bed on like a huge bender for weeks at a time. And then at the end of it, she kind of got out of it and looked at her bed and it was just gross. She had a lot of trash and just like cigarette butts and things. And she just sort of wanted to display that. So she displayed it. People were really upset about the work when they saw it. And it was a full-size bed, not a miniature. So yeah, people were like shocked at the work. It was kind of like performance art. And when I was in art school, I was really taken aback by the piece. And that's kind of the inspiration why I decided to make it in miniature. So I added a lot more stuff than she had on her bed, but it was kind of like a combination of, you know, me being gay and like my experience and my depression and my past with mental health. And yeah, it was just kind of like a bunch of different things I was going through at the time.
Yeah.
And I also added stuff over the years, like this is 3D printed, my little Hitachi wand, but everything else is completely made of scratch or just like found materials. And
yeah. So there are images of this piece on your website, right? That they can see, because there's you also photographer. Your photography is really great too. So if folks want to see really beautiful. It's hard to see in video. I mean, we're seeing it now, but check out Amanda's website for more pictures. We put that in the link. That's awesome. So this is an interesting segue because you were talking about how everything in that piece was made by hand. So interesting. Now you're saying now you work in 3D or maybe even a combination of both. Can you share a piece that is in 3D that you've worked on recently?
Yeah, so last summer in quarantine, and the pandemic and COVID really affected my mental health a lot, just because I was going through a lot of stuff at the time and being isolated in New York City, which was the epicenter of COVID at the time, and back in last March, April, crazy, it's been a year. So I was going through a lot of stuff, like with my personal life, with my art, with the fact that I was basically forced to move out of New York. So I made a piece for the Shelter in Place gallery, which is on Instagram. They're a virtual gallery. And I made this piece called Isolation, and it actually has a base to it, but I didn't want to bring the base.
Yeah, I love the base.
But
sculpted underground thing. You guys have to check out the full piece, but yes.
So this was completely 3D printed. I designed everything on 3D printing, 3D modeling program called Tinkercad, which is like made for kids, but I find that I can make a lot on it. So I made everything pretty much from scratch. Everything inside is either 3D printed or found materials or paper. With working with 1/44th scale, it's easy to kind of like make little tiny things that look like what they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
So I know it's hard to see, but
we can see. So everything is printed, but there's a finishing process to it, right?
Yes.
So, and the finishing entails painting, I imagine. Is there any other mediums you use to finish some of these pieces?
Yeah, so I have two different kinds of 3D printers. One is a FDM printer, which is with plastic. And then I have a resin printer. So resin printing, you can get finer details. It's really good for miniatures, especially tiny 1/44th scale miniatures like this.
Yeah.
So, and when I print it, after it's cured and everything, I do have to sand sometimes, and then I can paint.
So we're going to get an awesome video that Amanda put together to demonstrate in quick time, fast time, the process that she goes through to make a 3D piece. But before we do that, just for the layman, which most of us I'm imagining are, if we want to get involved in making in doing a 3D project, what is the very first step? Obviously, you have to envision what you want to make, and you have to have the tools. But let's say you mentioned there's a program that you actually have to go to, right? And
there's a ton of different programs.
There's a ton of different programs. But let's say, and you said there was one that was actually easiest to use, that was for children?
Tinkercad is made by the company Autodesk, who makes like AutoCAD programming. And Tinkercad is the easiest to learn. It's very user friendly. There are also other programs. I've actually been trying to learn how to use Blender, which is a little more of an advanced program. But for 3D printing, Tinkercad for basic things, if you want to make like a fridge or a stove or something for your house, your dollhouse, Tinkercad is the way to go.
Okay, and that you could basically find the chair you want to make on there already created in.
No, you would have to make it yourself. They do have like a user. It's really badly like designed. Like searching for stuff that other users have made, but you can. Basically making a chair in Tinkercad probably isn't that hard. I mean, for me, I've been using it for a long time, but it's not hard to learn. If you had something specific in mind that you wanted to create, you could use Tinkercad to make it.
So we do have a question already, which is great. How do you choose which method to use, which printer you use, resin or plastic? Is it true that the plastics were sort of the first ones in the in the 3D printing world?
They weren't the first ones, but they were the first to be the trademark to or the copyright to expire. And then it was like back in 2009, there was like one company that owned the trademark for 3D printing. It's called Stratus, and they still do 3D printing, but so that expired, and then it was open for anybody to create 3D printers, which is why 3D printing kind of surged during like the early 2010s. But yeah, so when I'm
stalled, you could also say it stalled for a while because there was nothing happening.
Yeah, and there's like a ton of different. Actually, this type of printing was like the first type of printing to be invented. And then there's like a really fascinating history about 3D printing I won't get into, but
no,
anyway.
Fascinating to hear. So
deciding if I want to use FDM versus resin, it really depends on the thing that I want to print. So if I know that it can be printed flat very easily, if it's larger, if I don't mind sanding it a little more or whatever, and it doesn't need a lot of supports, I usually use my FDM printer. And I've used my FDM printer for pretty much anything. I've used it to make, actually, I have something here that I made on my FDM printer.
And that's
this is a little easel.
That's the plastic. That's plastic.
Yeah, this is actually wood infused plastic. So it sands and stains like wood.
Oh.
Yeah, which is the cool thing about FDM printing, that you can print with a lot of different materials. Resin printing is kind of, there are different resins you can use, but it's a little limited. So if I wanted to print something in a wood filament, I would use my FDM printers. Now, if I wanted to print something very small, very tiny, like this little like wood glue, you know.
Oh, I love that.
or this very tiny like little drawing mannequin.
Wait, could you go back to the Gorilla Glue piece?
Oh,
Is there a paper label on there?
Yeah, I made that.
Okay, so the actual glue is 3D printed, and then you wrapped paper around it.
Yeah, paper covered with tape. Yeah. And the label I made.
And what is the weight of that piece? I mean, I know you
can't. It's pretty light.
Obviously, it's going to be light, but is there any weight to it, or is it like just?
It has some weight. It will stand up. Like it's not just going to like fall over.
Yeah.
Something like this is definitely less weight. And then my Cricut machine has a little weight to it also.
I love that. We're gonna let me know when you're ready to actually do a demonstration, because I'm going to pull up the video. I'm going to pull up the video. You ready now? Do you want to do that?
Yeah, I'll just finish what I was saying. The resin printing, usually I only use it for very small, tiny little itsy bitsy miniatures that I know that my FDM printer will definitely not be able to print.
Right. So different printers actually can get even more deeper in terms of detail.
Resin specifically is really good if you work in any lower scale than 1/12, like quarter scale, 1/44, I would highly recommend getting a resin printer.
That's awesome. And I mean, I know we're gonna get this. I have a million questions. All right. I'm gonna go ahead and start the video, and hopefully.
Yeah, I'll talk through it, I guess.
Yeah, and just tell us what's happening here. Talk about the process. Hopefully, you can see it.
I can't see it yet.
All right, hold on.
Oh, there we go. Got it. Okay, so that's my resin printer. It's pretty small, which is also different from FDM printers, which are much bigger. But you can see here, I'm actually changing out. I had transparent resin inside the printer, so I'm actually changing out the resin. So I wanted to show this because resin printing does have a lot more chemicals that you're working with, a lot more cleaning up that you need to do, more protection. Like I'm wearing gloves in this shot. I'm not wearing a mask because I have the window open right next to my printer. But if I had the window closed or something like that, I would wear a mask. So right now I'm going to be taking out the resin and filtering it back into the bottle. And resin is really expensive. So I do this filter process so that if there was a print that failed and something was floating around in the resin, I could filter it out with a fine mesh filter. So I'm just pouring it back in. That funnel, I need to get a new funnel because sometimes it falls over.
Can you melt that down and reuse it? Or did you just talk about that? Did I miss that?
Yeah, so the resin I always reuse the resin and filter it back in because you don't want to waste resin. It's very expensive.
You also don't
like
use
gold.
very much for miniatures, right?
Not really, actually. I mean, I've had my 2 bottles of resin for a couple months now. They do last a long time. If you're not printing like large things that are not hollow or something like that. I know people print bigger miniature or bigger things on their resin printers, but honestly, I'm always printing like very small things. So it doesn't take as much. And right there, I'm cleaning out everything with isopropyl alcohol. I have like a gallon of that stuff that I refill my spray bottle with. It's literally the only thing that cleans resin really well. There is water washable resin available on the market. I have not used it because I just have so much regular resin. I don't want to spend my money on. So the gloves, somebody mentioned gloves in the chat, I just saw, but I use rubber gloves for when I'm just doing maintenance stuff like this. But when I'm actually handling the 3D prints and taking the supports off and washing them, well, not washing them, but just taking the supports off, I wear nitrile gloves. And I used to only use nitrile, but then COVID hit and there weren't any gloves available on the market. So I had to improvise with my rubber gloves and they actually work really well. So I just kept them and it saves me money. Yeah. I can reuse them.
Yeah.
And so right there, I just put the tank back on. That is white resin that I'm about to put on. I shake it very well before I put it in because resin just works better when it's shaken because it does separate a little bit if you leave it for a long time. And I'm just pouring it in. I don't have to pour in too much because miniatures don't use a lot. And then I'm just gonna put the thing back on. I actually take it back off later when I want to show you the printing process. So now I'm gonna turn it on. And then I show you a little bit in a second how I upload my prints into my printer here. So this is the program I use that came with my printer, G2 box. So this is my Cricut machine and a couple other random things because printing takes so long and you'll see it says, I think this was like 5 or 6 hours, depending on the height, but that's another difference between FDM and resin printing. If anyone in the chat has done either, I think it froze, but it's okay. I'll just talk. Resin printing, it doesn't matter how many things are on the build plate. It will take the amount of time of whatever is tallest. So right here is the Cricut machine, and that takes 6 hours, 7 minutes, and 11 seconds to print. And then anything I put on the build plate after that will only print 6 hours. So FDM, on the other hand, if you tried to fill the build plate, it would take probably 11 hours or something like that. So that's the difference between resin and FDM too. I just put some random stuff on the plate just because I was testing some prints out.
Because you can combine things if you have enough. Is that what you're saying?
If I have enough space on the bed, yeah. But the bed is very small on this machine. And now I'm just, I just pressed go and it's going down into the resin. And that's also a difference between FDM and resin. Resin is kind of printing upside down and resin being exposed to an LED screen, and then FDM printing. Here's it printing. You can barely even see it going up and down. FDM printing the bed, it's like reversed. It's being printed on the bed and it's coming from the other side. So I cover my machine because it's right by the window and the resin can actually harden in the machine. So I always cover it with a towel.
Oh,
so this is after 6 hours. The print is done.
oh my God.
I know.
6 hours for one tiny thing. And they want to print 3D print houses.
Yeah, well, that's a different method, but it does take a very long time. Yeah.
Oh, it's upside down. Oh, wow.
So yeah, you'll see the supports there, and I'm going to take it off the bed. So this is also kind of a process. I have to clean the prints now because they're covered in resin. And if you just tried to put this into the UV lamp without washing them first, you'll have like globs of resin all over the place, and that's not a good look. So that's my pickle strainer of isopropyl alcohol. So a pickle strainer has like a little strainer inside, and I put my 3D print inside, and then you'll see me dunk it a couple of times to wash the print. So I take it off. And you'll see I show the camera. Oh, wonderful. Actually, one of the prints failed on it. You can see I touch it and I'm like, oh man, but sometimes it happens.
Yeah. Right. And so this is part of the cleaning process before?
Yeah, so I'm taking it off the bed. Yep.
Oh, you're really peeling it off.
Yeah, I got to peel it off a little bit. So that's it. I've dunked it in the tank, and then I just kind of wash it, kind of like a washing machine. I kind of dunk it a couple times, let it soak in there a little bit. And this process is really important. Cleaning it is super important. Just like any print that you do, you just want to clean it and make sure that it's just the pure resin that was already hardened. And this isn't even fully hardened. We still have to fully cure it. And I'll show that in a second. So I'm just wiping off the bed now so I can do another print if I want to. So I try not to waste paper towels.
Yeah.
So I usually use it for multiple things when cleaning.
Right.
And then I put it back on, and I was like, wait, I have some more stuff on there. I didn't realize, sorry. I forgot to cut this part out, but yeah. I just want to make sure it's as clean as possible for next time, and because resin likes to build up and be really sticky and gross.
Do the other materials need the same extensive cleaning process, or only the materials that need to be cured?
I mean, because I'm wearing gloves, sometimes it gets on my gloves and then it gets on the machine a little bit. So I like to clean the machine so it's not like splattered all over the place.
Right.
So this is why it kind of intimidates people, versus FDM, because there is a little more cleaning involved. And now, so I strained it a little bit, and now I'm going to go wash it off in water.
Right. How long has it been in that basket?
Just for filming. Yeah. Oh, okay. I don't leave it in very long. I take it out and I put it into another strainer, and then I wash it with water. And I found this process makes it less sticky. I hear that a lot, that the prints are very sticky when they go into the UV light, but if I do this isopropyl alcohol and then water wash, the prints aren't sticky at all. So it works for me.
Yeah.
And then I grab my nitrile gloves. Yeah. And now I'm taking the supports off. And I actually had a question about this on my TikTok, why I take the supports off before curing. And I find that if I try and take the supports off after it cures, it can break some of the miniatures. So I found that taking them off before I cure them is much better for very tiny things.
Do you do any sanding before it cures, or you only do the sanding after?
Only sanding after, and then I cure it. And that's my UV lamp. It's for nails. And I cure that for a couple minutes, maybe more if needed. And then afterwards, I sand and paint and glue together.
Applause.
And that's what it looks like in the end.
That is just super awesome. Even the string was 3D printed, or you put that on?
No, just the plug on the end of the string. That's actually dollhouse wire. dollhouse like electrical wire.
Uh-huh.
So
And there's some finishing and painting, right? The black in the back is painted.
yeah, I painted it, sanded it, added all the things inside.
The
Yeah.
silver roller.
Yep. All those are 3D printed.
I just love it. I mean, and I love the content too. It's like, here's a Cricut machine made with a 3D printer, which that's a whole nother Meet the Miniaturist episode, by the way, of Cricut Maker. That is amazing. All right, I'm gonna shut this down and then let's open this up to questions. I'm sure we have a million. I know I have a million. I thought that was just an amazing demonstration of
Thank you.
It's actually way more complicated, at least for me. I'm old. I mean, I just bravo for getting yourself in there, learning it, getting it done, and then, oh, by the way, leading the way in the types of things that you make that are inspiring people out there to either get involved in this craft, or, you know, just to be a collector. I mean, I think a lot of ways when the 3D came into play, there were a lot of the old school miniaturists who were like, no, can't do anything different. I mean, when laser printers came in, it was psh. But I think you're really changing the conversation. You're changing the dynamic about what could be, and leading the way on like really embracing the technology for making miniatures. So bravo. Thank you. That was just wonderful. All right. Yeah, Laura's saying all of us miniaturists will need to learn this. Yes, we will.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope to teach. I'm probably going to be teaching at Philadelphia Miniatura again this year.
Oh, so it's again, you did before? I don't remember.
I did, yeah, in 2019. So before COVID.
That class looks like. So do you actually get in, you learn, you make something at the end of the class? How long is it?
Yeah, so with that one, I just had my FDM printer, so my plastic printer, and I went over different types of printing, how to print, just everything, like an intro kind of, and then we put something that I printed together so you could see the post printing process.
That's awesome. Yeah, Laura wants to know if you can offer that online as well. That's a great.
I'm thinking about it. Yeah, definitely. I'm gonna be having more time soon. So yeah. I saw a question about if I designed the Cricut machine.
Oh yeah, there was a question about how did that happen?
I did. I designed it in Tinkercad.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I designed that in Tinkercad. There's a ton. I mean, once you learn Tinkercad, you can pretty much create anything you want. It's very versatile.
But you have to have some skills going in. You have to have some art skills. You have to know proportion and scale and design and the curves.
Yeah, scale is really important.
A little bit of engineering, knowing how those pieces are going to connect, where
it's a lot of trial and error.
Right.
You need patience, but a miniatures has patience already. So
I don't encourage anyone, but I don't want to also make it seem like this is the easiest thing in the world.
It's not. It's definitely like a learning curve. I mean, it took me, I've been 3D printing for 3 years now.
Yeah.
It's taken me until like this year to get perfect at it. Not even perfect yet, but yeah, I love it though.
Yeah. Well, talk a little bit about the things you can do in 3D that you might not be able to do in, let's say, classic, old school technology.
I will say, if you're trying to make multiples of things, if you were going to make, for example, a wine shop or something, or a kind of store or something where you need multiples of the same exact thing, I would never do that from scratch. I mean, you can make molds and stuff like that, but it's not always perfect, which I find resin printing and 3D printing in general to be great. Also just time. I mean, it does take time to 3D model and all that, but, I used to take so much time trying to sculpt something perfectly, and then it would be out of scale, and then I would have to restart. And when I make something 3D modeled, even if I am going to make it from scratch in, in person, like in real life, not on a computer, I like to design it on Tinkercad first and see what it would look like, what kind of proportions I would need. And then I can work out the scale off the computer. So sometimes it's good for sketching, I guess. I don't know. If I want to see how something looks.
That's really interesting. I had never thought about that, using 3D as a tool to help you make something scratch build. That's fascinating. Awesome.
So sometimes it just doesn't work out with a 3D print. And I'm like, you know what? Forget it. I'm just going to make it out of something like a piece of wood or something. So I still do a lot of scratch building stuff. but 3D printing, like there are things that I would never be able to make as tiny as I do. Like, for example, this little like sanitizer. I'm just going to take this off my, I don't know if you
Love that. Yes.
this is printed in transparent resin,
Ah,
which is like something like I would have to make this out of styrene or wood, and then I would have to make a mold of it and then put resin inside. And it's just like this whole process. And I've done it before. I did it when I used to make these all the time, but with printing, I just print it and then I'm done. I just paint it and I'm done and put a label on it. And it's like, if I just need one thing for a scene or something, I don't want to spend all day making it when I can just have that file ready and print it. So it does save me a lot of time, especially making really detailed, highly detailed scenes that I make. Saving time is really important. And another thing, because people sometimes say that, oh, it's 3D printing, it's like cheating or whatever, which I don't agree with. I think it's another tool, just like laser cutting. Right. And laser cutting has been a part of the miniature community for a long time, especially with kits and stuff. But I find that, you know, trying to make something for like a commercial commission, which I've done a lot of those, I'm on a time crunch. I have a deadline. I can't be making little tiny things for days at a time. Like I need to print them off, get them painted, get them in the scene for the client. So a lot of it's really like trying to get things done on time with commissions, which is why 3D printing really has saved me a couple of times. And why when we did the show, when we did the miniature show, everything was from scratch. They wouldn't allow 3D printing. So it took a lot of planning. I know. Well, you know, it took a lot of planning on my part since we were doing a bar. I was like, oh God, we got to make all these bottles and we can't 3D print any of them. So I had to make a bunch of molds and it was a nightmare. But anyway, 3D printing would have saved me.
Yeah, for sure. So you did mention before when we spoke that you were working on a new project, and that was going to be my next question. What is next for you? What are you working on now?
I'm working on like 9 projects right now, but which you know all about.
And in progress? Anything in progress that you want to share or no?
Yeah, so I have I've been working on this little like artist cottage, and you know, it's not very like, I mean, everybody has done an artist cottage, but most of the stuff inside is actually 3D printed. And it's half scale. So if anybody does smaller scales, which I shout out to my smaller scale people, especially half scale. Not a lot of people do half scale, and I love it. It's like a great scale to work in. But I did.
Oh, look at that. Even the walls are 3D printed?
No, this is made out of wood.
Oh, okay. So inside. Oh.
So everything inside, this light works, that's 3D printed. I'll actually take out some of the stuff because it's kind of hard to see. But I have a mix. I mean, I always do a mix of like 3D printed stuff and found objects, things I make from scratch.
Right, like paper, you can't 3D print paper. So paper on your desk, it's going to be paper. Look at that. That's lovely. Oh.
So this, for example, is plastic printed.
Mm-hmm.
These bottles down here were resin printed.
Got it. Yes.
These are beads. These are beads.
So it's multi material, multi printed, multi material.
Yeah, I love going back to my roots. You know, this is how I started as a miniaturist. You know, just using stuff that I found around craft stores or whatever. Yeah. Plastic pieces that I found, stuff like that.
So Michelle has a question. Is there anything you wouldn't or couldn't 3D print?
Oh, God.
Well, you wouldn't paper. I mean, that doesn't make sense. But
yeah,
but that has metal.
I wouldn't print like if I'm building something, a house or something, I wouldn't really 3D print like windows or a door or anything like that. But I have, for my grandma's dollhouse, I did 3D print shutters because I wanted to design them myself. And again, her house has like, I don't know, 12 windows. So I again had to, something that I needed to reproduce multiple times. And if I was going to buy the shutters, it would cost me over $100 when I could just 3D print them myself. So that was something that I printed, but I wouldn't really print like, I mean, I have in the past for like my room box, like a window or something. I just find that like wood windows and doors that are available on the dollhouse like scene are good enough for me. Like I like the ones in this house.
You can buy it and it's affordable, then yeah, you should.
Yeah.
If it works, why not buy it?
Yeah, and building materials in general, I usually just buy them because I like the look of the wood and I like working with wood. So though I did 3D print, and I might go grab it if you don't mind. I 3D printed so my grandma's dollhouse, my cat tried to, yeah, that's all I have to say, my cat, but he kind of destroyed two of the front windows. And so I had this huge hole and I was like, oh no, like what am I gonna do for this hole? So I decided to put a bay window in there, and I decided to 3D print it because I wanted specific dimensions, and I tried to do it in wood and it just wasn't happening for me. So I'm gonna go grab that real quick.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, definitely.
I want to show that.
That's awesome. Do we have any other questions while Amanda is finding her cat? I don't know what the cat did to it. I don't know. We'll see. Yeah, so you guys have any other questions before we see that wonderful fixer-upper? I guess that's what you would call it at this point. Yeah. Oh, wow.
Okay, I'm back.
Yes.
So
and that's all one piece?
Yeah, I had to glue it together. But the frame, the bottom part, and the bottom part of this
are all printed.
All 3D printed, and then this top part is foam core with dollhouse shingles on top.
Wow, that's
so
great.
That was something I was like, I'll just 3D print it.
Yeah.
I was getting frustrated, and I don't want to get frustrated when I do miniatures, so it just saved me a little bit of time and effort.
Right. Well, that's awesome. And this is, like someone just said, this has been very informative. Absolutely. This has been informative. This has been inspirational. Amanda, this has been just so wonderful. We have put your information in the chat box so people can find you. Are you open to DMs and questions offline? If folks have any other questions, if they didn't get answered here, I don't want to bombard you with, questions.
On the first stairs and railings? Which piece? This one? Sorry, I was answering a question in the chat.
Yeah, the first piece, that must be the first piece. Yeah, that was what you shared.
Yeah, this is all 3D printed.
Yeah, all 3D printed. Yep. Anyway, this has been wonderful. Amanda, you've been awesome. Thank you for that wonderful video. Thank you for sharing your work with us. Thank you for sharing all your inspirations. We're going to see so much more of you in the future, and I'm so glad because you really are the future of miniatures. You are the future of the miniatures world, and we're so grateful to have you as part of it. So thank you. And thank you everybody else for joining at home. Until our next Meet the Miniaturist, have a great rest of your weekend, and goodbye, everybody.
Bye, thank you.